This happened after my promotion dinner. Kyle and Rachel went missing. I saw my husband with my sister behind the restaurant, and my world collapsed. What would you have done? The humid Boston air hung heavy, thick with the promise of a thunderstorm, as I clutched the commemorative plaque. My Attorney of the Year award, still gleaming under the dim light spilling from the back of Luigi's. It was supposed to be the perfect night, a celebration of years of relentless work, of climbing the ladder, of the crisp spring air, the smell of garlic and basil, the congratulatory smiles, all a carefully constructed facade, masking the rot that festered beneath. I'd noticed them slip out. Kyle, my husband of 10 years, and Rachel, my baby sister, barely 29. A shared glance, a hushed whisper, and then gone. Just like that. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Rachel needed a cigarette. Maybe Kyle was just being a good brother-in-law, offering her a ride home. But the feeling, that gnawing, insidious feeling, wouldn't let me be. It coiled in my stomach, a cold, hard knot of dread. So, I followed. The back of Luigi's was a far cry from the cozy, red-checkered tablecloths inside. Dumpsters overflowed, the air thick with the stench of stale grease and decay. And there they were. Kyle was leaning against the brick wall, Rachel facing him, her back to me. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the air vibrated with tension. Rachel's hands were moving, agitated, her voice a low, frantic murmur. Kyle's face, normally so open and affable, was tight, almost guilty. I moved closer, my shoes crunching on the gravel. A dropped cigarette butt skittered across the pavement. They both turned, the look on their faces. I'll never forget it. Kyle's, a mixture of shock and something akin to shame. Rachel's pure, unadulterated panic. The words caught in my throat, a strangled gasp that betrayed my presence. "What's going on?" I managed to croak out, my voice shaking. The plaque felt heavy in my hand, a cruel reminder of everything I thought I had. Kyle stammered, We were just talking. Talking? Out here? In the garbage?" I gestured around us, the irony of the setting not lost on me. About what, exactly? The superior quality of Luigi's refuse. Rachel stepped forward, her eyes wide and pleading. "It's nothing, honestly, just family stuff. Family stuff, that's what she called it." The two people I trusted most in the world, huddled together in the alley, keeping secrets from me. Family stuff that requires hushed tones and clandestine meetings behind a restaurant. My voice was rising now, the anger starting to bubble up, threatening to spill over. "I think I deserve to know what this family stuff is." Kyle reached for my hand, but I flinched away. "It's complicated," he said, his voice low and placating. "Let's just go home and talk about it, okay?" Complicated? This was more than complicated. This was a betrayal. This was my husband and my sister acting like guilty teenagers caught sneaking out after curfew. What were they hiding? And why did it feel like it was all at my expense? I pulled away, shaking my head. "No, I want to know now. What is going on between you two?" They exchanged another look, a silent conversation passing between them. "It's about the money." The money, my bonus. The $21,400 I had earned after years of blood, sweat, and tears. The money we had all agreed would go towards a down payment on a bigger house, a house with a real backyard where we could... What did my bonus have to do with clandestine meetings behind Luigi's? "What about the money?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes. Kyle shifted uncomfortably, kicking at a loose pebble on the ground. The air crackled with unspoken words, with a web of deceit that I was only beginning to untangle. Then Rachel blurted it out. We invested it." "Invested it? Without my knowledge? Without my consent?" "Invested it where?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. "And why didn't you tell me?" They didn't answer. They just stood there, Two figures bathed in the flickering neon light of the Luigi sign, their silence a deafening confession. I felt a surge of nausea, a wave of dizziness that threatened to knock me off my feet. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, was crumbling around me. What would you have done? Would you have screamed? Would you have cried? Would you have walked away and never looked back? I didn't do any of those things. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control of my emotions. I had to know the truth. I had to understand what had happened, even if it destroyed me in the process. Tell me everything, I said, my voice barely audible. Tell me everything right now. That night, I barely slept. Kyle and Rachel's explanation was a twisted web of half-truths and evasions. They claimed they had invested my bonus in a sure thing, a hot tip from a friend, promising exponential returns. A family savings account, they called it. They swore they had only wanted to surprise me, to provide a better future for us all. But the more they talked, the more suspicious I became. Their stories didn't quite line up. Their eyes darted nervously, and the feeling, that cold, hard knot in my stomach, only grew tighter. I started digging. I started with our bank statements. I spent hours poring over the numbers, searching for any trace of the $21,400. And then I found it. A withdrawal, made the day after my promotion dinner. The description, transfer to family savings account. But the account number, it wasn't an account I recognized. I called the bank, pretending to be Kyle, claiming I had forgotten the details of our family savings account. The teller, bless her heart, gave me the information. The account was registered under a different name, a name I had never heard before. Emerald Investments. Emerald Investments. It sounded like a scam, a fly-by-night operation designed to fleece unsuspecting investors. And my husband, my own husband, had given them my money. I drove to the address listed for Emerald Investments. It wasn't an office building. It wasn't even a real business. It was a dilapidated storefront, the windows boarded up, the paint peeling. A handwritten sign hung crookedly on the door. Closed for renovations. Closed for renovations? More like closed for good. The sun was setting behind the neighbor's house, casting long, ominous shadows across my lawn as I drove home. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, a twisted version of my own life. Back at the house, I confronted Kyle again. I showed him the bank statement, the address for Emerald Investments. I demanded the truth. He admitted that he hadn't invested the money. He had given it to Rachel. Given it to Rachel? Why would he do that? What could she possibly need $21,400 for? He claimed he didn't know. He said Rachel had told him she was in trouble, that she needed the money desperately. He said he had been trying to protect her, to keep me from finding out. Protect her? From what? And why was Rachel so secretive, so evasive? That night, I decided to confront Rachel myself. I drove to her apartment, a cramped one-bedroom place in a rundown building on the outskirts of town. The building smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding in my chest. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was a mess. Clothes were scattered on the floor, dirty dishes piled in the sink, empty beer cans littered the coffee table. The air was thick with the smell of stale perfume and something else, something metallic and unsettling. Rachel wasn't there, but on the kitchen table, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A stack of documents neatly arranged. Tax returns, my tax returns. And they were different. The numbers were wrong. The deductions were inflated. The income was lower, much lower. I picked up the top return, my hands trembling. It was a copy, but the signature, it looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was a forgery. Someone had been filing false tax returns in my name. Someone had been systematically defrauding the government. And I had a very strong suspicion who was responsible. What would you have done? Would you have called the police? Would you have confronted Rachel immediately? Would you have burned the tax returns and pretended you never saw them? I didn't do any of those things. I sat down at the kitchen table and started to read. The returns spanned the past 5 years, a meticulous, carefully constructed scheme designed to siphon off money from my hard-earned income. And the total amount, it was staggering. Over $100,000. $100,000 that I didn't know I was missing. $100,000 that someone had been stealing from me, right under my nose. And then I saw it. A small detail, buried in the fine print, a routing number, an account number that I recognized. It was the account number for Emerald Investments. Everything clicked into place. Rachel hadn't been in trouble. She had been running a scam. A sophisticated, long-term scam that had been draining my bank account for years. And Kyle, he had been her accomplice. The metallic smell I had noticed earlier, it was the smell of ink. Rachel had been forging my tax returns in her own apartment, using my money, living off my sweat and tears. Rage, pure, unadulterated rage, surged through me. I wanted to scream, to break things, to tear the apartment apart. But I knew I couldn't. I had to stay calm. I had to think. I gathered the tax returns, carefully placing them in a large envelope. I needed evidence. I needed proof. I needed to make sure that Rachel and Kyle paid for what they had done. As I was leaving the apartment, I noticed something else. A small white envelope, tucked behind a stack of books on a shelf. It was addressed to me. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten note. "Stay out of this," it read, "or you'll regret it." The words were simple, but the threat was clear. Someone knew I was onto them. Someone was warning me to back off. Someone was willing to go to any lengths to protect their secret. I crumpled the note in my fist, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about something much more dangerous. This was about power. This was about control. And someone was willing to threaten me to get it. I left Rachel's apartment, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand. The rain was starting to fall, a cold, relentless drizzle that mirrored the storm raging inside me. I drove home, my mind racing. Who had written the note? Was it Rachel? Was it Kyle? Or was it someone else entirely? And what were they capable of? How far would they go to protect their secret? When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. Kyle was asleep in bed, snoring softly. I stood there for a moment, watching him, my heart filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me in such a profound and devastating way? I went into the living room and sat down on the couch, the envelope containing the tax returns resting on my lap. I had a choice to make. I could turn them in. I could expose Rachel and Kyle for their crimes. I could watch them face the consequences of their actions. But doing so would mean destroying my family. It would mean bringing shame and disgrace upon my parents. It would mean Navsigda changing the way I looked at the people I loved most in the world. Or I could let it go. I could pretend I never found the tax returns. I could forgive Rachel and Kyle. I could try to rebuild our lives, to put the pieces back together. But could I ever truly trust them again? Could I ever forget what they had done? What would you have done? I confronted Rachel with the forged tax returns. She initially denied everything, but eventually broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She claimed she had only wanted to help Kyle, that he was in debt, that he had begged her to help him. She swore she had never meant to hurt me. Kyle, predictably, played the victim. He claimed he had been manipulated by Rachel, that he had been too weak to resist her. He said he loved me more than anything in the world, that he would do anything to make things right. I didn't know what to believe. I wanted to believe them, to forgive them, to move on, but the damage was done. The trust was broken, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still hiding something from me. Then, one afternoon, while cleaning out Kyle's closet, I found something that changed everything. A small leather-bound notebook, hidden in the back of a drawer. It was Rachel's. I opened it, my hands trembling. It was a diary. I started to read. The diary entries spanned several years, chronicling Rachel's life, her hopes, her dreams, her feelings for Kyle. And it became clear that her feelings for Kyle were far more than just sisterly affection. She was in love with him. She had been in love with him for years. The diary entries were filled with longing, with jealousy, with resentment towards me. She resented my success, my happiness, my relationship with Kyle. She believed that she deserved him more than I did. And then I understood. The scam, the forged tax returns, the threats. It wasn't just about money, it was about revenge. It was about destroying my life, taking away everything I held dear. She had wanted to ruin me, and she had almost succeeded. I closed the diary, my heart aching with a pain I had never known before. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, it was all too much to bear. I had to get away. I had to escape. I packed a bag, threw in a few essentials, and left the house. I didn't tell Kyle where I was going. I didn't leave a note. I just drove away, leaving everything behind. I ended up in a small town on the coast of Maine, a place I had always dreamed of visiting. I rented a small cottage overlooking the ocean, a place where I could be alone with my thoughts, a place where I could heal. I spent my days walking along the beach, listening to the waves, watching the sun rise and set. I started to paint again, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends. I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. Slowly, gradually, I started to heal. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. I started to forgive myself for being so naive, for trusting the wrong people. I started to realize that I was strong, that I was resilient, that I could survive anything. After a few months, I decided it was time to go back. I had unfinished business to take care of. I returned to Boston, to my old life, to the house I had shared with Kyle. He was waiting for me. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His eyes were bloodshot. His clothes were rumpled. He looked like a broken man. He begged me to forgive him. He swore he had learned his lesson. He promised he would do anything to make things right. I looked at him, my heart filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. I knew I could never forgive him. I knew I could never trust him again. I handed him the divorce papers. He didn't fight me. He signed them without a word. I then went to the police. I turned over the forged tax returns, the diary, the threatening note. I told them everything. Rachel and Kyle were arrested. They were charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and tax evasion. They faced years in prison. I testified against them in court. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the right thing to do. They were found guilty. After the trial, I sold the house. I used the money to start my own law firm, a firm dedicated to helping women who had been victimized by financial fraud. I became a champion for women's rights. I spoke out against domestic violence. I became an advocate for financial literacy. I turned my pain into purpose. It wasn't easy. There were times when I wanted to give up, to crawl into a hole and disappear, but I didn't. I kept fighting. I kept moving forward. And eventually, I found happiness again. I found love again. I found peace. I learned that even the darkest of betrayals can lead to something beautiful, something meaningful. I learned that even when your world falls apart, you can rebuild it, stronger and better than before. I learned that forgiveness is not always possible, but justice is always necessary. And I learned that sometimes the greatest act of revenge is simply living your best life. So what would you have done? Would you have forgiven them? Would you have sought revenge? There's no right or wrong answer. Every situation is different. Every person is different. But I hope that my story has given you something to think about. I hope that it has inspired you to stand up for yourself, to fight for what you believe in, to never give up on your dreams. And most of all, I hope that it has reminded you that you are strong, you are resilient, and you are capable of anything. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what you would have chosen, justice or forgiveness. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. I hope this will help other women find strength in their challenges. Write what you would choose. It's funny, isn't it? How life can change in an instant. 1 minute you're celebrating a professional milestone. The silence after the verdict was deafening. Even the bustling city outside the courthouse seemed to hold its breath. I remember walking out into the sunlight, feeling strangely numb. It was over. The trial was over. Rachel and Kyle were going to prison. Justice had been served. But there was no joy, no sense of triumph, just a hollow ache in my chest. I remember my mother's face in the courtroom. She tried to smile at me, a watery, strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't approve of my decision to press charges. Family stays together, she had always said. But what family was there left to stay together? The foundation had crumbled. After the trial, I tried to reconnect with her. We went out for lunch a few times, but the conversations were strained, awkward. She kept bringing up the past, reminding me of all the good times we had shared as a family. It was like she was trying to rewrite history, to erase the pain and betrayal. But I couldn't. I couldn't forget what Rachel and Kyle had done. One afternoon, she called me, her voice trembling. "Rachel wants to see you," she said. "She's asked for you, in prison." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse, to slam the phone down and block her out of my life forever. But another part of me, a small, persistent voice, urged me to go, to hear what Rachel had to say. What would you have done? Visited her or refused? I drove to the prison, a grim, imposing structure on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and despair. I went through the security checks, my heart pounding in my chest. The guard led me to a small, sterile room with a metal table and 2 chairs. Rachel was already there, sitting with her head bowed. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were ill-fitting, her skin was pale and drawn. The spark, the vibrancy that had once defined her, was gone. She looked defeated. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible.